Hi everyone. With the sudden upsurge in wanting to make masks for our families, I thought I would show you how to make the masks that we've been demonstrating through the shop and have been on Facebook. This is the mask that I made last shutdown. You can see that I have used elastic for the earpieces, 6mm. However, that is no longer available. So what I have done is adapted the pattern to use bias binding as ties instead of using elastic. When you're using your mask, because of the bias binding, I'm suggesting that you tie top and bottom behind your head and the other top and bottom behind your head. That way it does not slip down, especially if you have put the top pieces over your ear. You don't have to tie tightly, it's simply enough that the mask is secure and comfortable on your head. Now, each mask requires 20 centimetres full width of fabric, and this is how we start. So I've pressed my fabric, getting out all the creases from in the shop, folded it in half, selvages together. Now I'm going to fold again to meet the selvage. Then I'm going to fold back to the first fold, turn over and fold back again. So that in one area I have got 2 folds of fabric, the other area I have got my selvage showing. To put my pattern piece onto the fabric, I want to make sure the 2 folds are the same, and I can make just hand pressing to make it easy. I'm then going to put my pattern piece onto the fabric, straight side to those double folds. Pin it on and cut it out. So just one moment while I pin securely on. You can cut however you like, whether it's using a roller or scissors. It's what you're comfortable doing. Tonight I'll be using scissors. Now I'm cutting through all the layers at once. Yes, it is thick, but that's okay. This is actually going to be sufficient for 2 complete masks. Now you can see as I've cut that, I've come off the edge where the selvage was. That's okay because that's going to be on the inner side of my mask and not actually seen in the end. Unpin. Now, take off my pattern. On this side, if I have got some folds like that, because my width of fabric is a bit narrow in this particular fabric, I'm simply going to cut those open. Some fabrics slightly wider mean that you don't have that as an issue. Now as I pull that apart, I've got sufficient for 2 masks. Here's one mask, here's a second mask. Now I'm going to very carefully select what is a piece with my selvage on it and make sure that I've got a complete piece alongside. So I'm just trading those over so I've got an easy way of finding a right side and wrong side as I proceed. Now the sewing, right sides together, and I'm actually going to sew the curved edge. Now on my pattern piece that is called side A. Match the curve together. You need to absolutely pin. If you're confident enough not to pin, that's okay. I'm using my 1/4 inch foot because these are 1/4 inch seams. going to simply sew with my standard seam length that first curve, lifting my presser foot as I need to go around that curve smoothly. When I get to the top, knot and cut, and then I can do the second side. So exactly the same on the other end. 1/4 inch seam, going around that curve, lifting your presser foot as you need to make that curve nice and smooth. Okay, I'm now going to bring the seams together. I'm going to have one going left, one going right. If you're a patchwork person, you will be familiar with that. And I'm going to match the seams on the top edge of my mask, and on my pattern piece, that is edge number or letter B. I'm going to sew from the fold all the way to the other end of the fold along the top edge of the mask. Again, using my 1/4 inch foot as a guide for my seam. Lifting my foot, repositioning as I need to get a nice curve. When I get to the fold, knot and cut. Now I want to seam across what will be the bottom of my mask. Again, I'm going to put the seams together like I did at the top, one going left, one going right, but I'll be matching it to the top. So put those seams together, just hand creasing the fold over there, and I'm going to sew across the bottom of my mask, but this time I'm going to leave a gap so that I can turn it right way out. So from one fold, stitch in a little way and stop. Move on however much is comfortable for you to be able to turn the mask right side out. Through the seams that are joined, all the way to the other fold, knot and cut. Now this time I'm going to find that opening gap and turn my mask right side out. Now this particular pattern is what I'm calling the small adult. It is what Amanda and I were wearing in the photo on Facebook. It's very comfortable for a woman, probably a little small for a male face, probably a bit big for a child. I'm currently redrafting so that I've got those other two sizes as well. As I've pulled my mask in the right way, I'm now just making sure that my corners are out. If you're having difficulty with just your fingers, this is a hair marker, or you could use an awl to just make sure that your corners are nice and sharp. Once they're nicely turned, make sure that the gap is sitting quite nicely, and then I'm going to press everything just so that it is easy for me to stitch around top stitch wise. So to do that, just using my iron, rolling the seam and press. Now the fabric I've been using is quilting fabric, cotton. You'll note that no, I am not putting a extra layer inside. My aim for these masks is to assist our need to keep everybody safe in these COVID times. Discussing whether to put an inner in or not with various people, including medical people. Yes, of course you can if that's what you want to do. However, make sure that they are comfortable to wear, comfortable to breathe. If they are more difficult to breathe through, the less likely you will wear them, and therefore you need to have a mask that you are going to be wearing rather than saying I don't like it, or pulling it down on your face rather than giving your face full coverage. A mask is not going to be your only avenue of defence against COVID. Now, I've got that nicely pressed. I'm going to change to my edge stitch foot, which on a Bernina is number 10, so that I can stitch around the edges. You'll note on my machine I'm using my dual feed because it's very easy for me to keep a nice even edge and have my fabric feeding through nice and easily. So I've just been changing my settings on my machine to accept my number 10 foot. I tend to start on one of the edges because I know that's going to actually get folded under to make the casing for elastic or bias binding. So with my number 10 foot on, I've moved my needle position over either 2 or 3 spaces depending on what you're comfortable with, and I'm going to stitch around the entire mask. This is going to be closing the gap that we had for turning the mask right way out. Flatten it down so that it's easy to come over the high part of the mask, which is going to be sitting over the top of your nose. Right around, whoops, one more stitch I think. Knot and cut. And now is the time to decide which is the right side, which is the wrong side of your mask, because there's no going back after the next seam. I'm going to say that's my right side, so I'm going to fold over the edges, which is actually side D on the pattern. And I'm going to use that same stitching that I've just used to stitch around the whole mask to hold it as a casing. I've actually folded it over by 1 centimetre, and I'm stitching right on top of my top stitching because of course that's the same line from my needle that I had before. Turn over. Again, the centimetre. Now I'm used to just eyeing that. If you're not, by all means measure it. And turn my mask around and I won't have to move the needle. There's my mask. Okay. Now, either if you have got elastic at home, you can use 6mm elastic. If you do not, you will need to be using bias binding. So, for my bias binding version, I have cut 1 metre length of bias binding per ear. Okay, so it's 2 metres of bias binding per mask. I have simply stitched the bias binding together and thread it through the casing you've just made. After that, I have simply stitched in the centre so that it can't be pulled out, and in fact when I am putting the mask on it can actually ruffle up a bit because of how I tie it, and that means that it is holding more firmly to your face. Great little mask. The pattern will be on our website. Fabric 20 centimetres across the width of the fabric, and you will make 2 masks at a time. Please make them, and even more, please wear them. Keep yourself safe, keep those around you safe. Thanks folks.